And they said that they had found the lady's vehicle on a dead-end street and that they were making a house-to-house search for her. And as soon as they said house-to-house search, it was as if I heard someone speaking to me, said, she's not in a house. And as soon as that thought registered, I saw exactly where she was. It was like there was a picture in front of me.
On December 17, 1980, 32-year-old Etta Smith arrived at the Lockheed Aerospace plant where she worked and readied herself for the day ahead. In the background, the radio featured the story of 31-year-old nurse Melanie Uribe, who had mysteriously vanished on her way to work. Upon hearing the story, Etta was overcome with visions of Melanie. When she arrived at the Los Angeles police station, she had no idea if she would be believed or whether they would think she was mad. Did she actually experience a psychic connection to the case? And would it help detectives in solving it? Welcome back to Real Crime Storytime, where we shed light on twisted cases across the globe. Today, we are looking at the bizarre murder of Melanie Uribe that was solved by an unlikely source. But first, if you haven't subscribed to our channel by now, please consider hitting the subscribe button and pressing the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's dive right into this mystery without further ado. Burbank, California sits 12 miles northwest of Los Angeles, and whilst Hollywood might be a few miles away, Burbank has its own star power. In the 1980s, Burbank was an up-and-coming neighborhood and the place to be. With a population of around 107,000, the residents of Burbank are accustomed to big city life and the troubles that come with it. While most neighborhoods are peaceful, evil lurks where you'd least expect it. Melanie Uribe was born on September 9, 1948. Unfortunately, there is not much information available about Melanie's life. By 1980, 31-year-old Melanie was divorced and was raising her 8-year-old son alone. Melanie worked as a nurse at the Pacoima Hospital in Burbank, California, and her colleagues described her as devoted and hardworking. Melanie's kind nature meant she was beloved by all who knew her, and she worked hard to give her son a better life. She was also noted as extremely punctual and would never miss a shift without calling in first. On December 15, 1980, doctors at Pacoima Hospital watched as the clock ticked away. They stood in the ward corridors, glancing up and down, looking for any sign of Melanie. After failing to find her in the wards, they checked the clocking-in records for that morning and found that Melanie had never arrived at work. Sensing that something wasn't right, one of her colleagues picked up the phone and dialed Melanie's home, but there was no answer. As the doctor heard the droning dial tone reverberating in his ear, he felt a knot in his stomach. Shortly after the failed call to Melanie's home, the Pacoima Hospital contacted the Los Angeles Police Department, triggering a missing person investigation. The Los Angeles Police Department arrived at Melanie's home and found it eerily quiet. There is no mention of where her son was at the time of her disappearance, and we can only hope he was safe. Investigators searched high and low in Melanie's home but found no clues. They spoke to neighbors and Melanie's family and discovered that the last time she had been seen was on the morning of December 15, 1980. Neighbors recalled seeing Melanie entering her van and heading off to work. So where was she now? The LAPD released details of Melanie's disappearance to the local news. Every channel and station broadcasted this news, and the city of Burbank watched on in horror. California was no stranger to serial killers, and many residents feared they might be next. Doors and windows were locked, weapons were purchased, and the mood in the city was tense. On December 16th, the day after Melanie disappeared, investigators made a shocking discovery. Their search had taken them to Lopez Canyon in the San Gabriel Mountains. Here, the Los Angeles Police Department stumbled across Melanie's burnt-out pickup truck. Her nurse's uniform was inside, but there was no sign of Melanie. Panic and pressure were mounting on the LAPD, and they were in a race against time to find Melanie alive. When news of Melanie's disappearance hit the headlines, tips and leads began pouring in. Most of them were not valuable and were cases of mistaken identity or jumbled memories. Others were much more useful, and much more sinister. Several anonymous witnesses called the LAPD and reported that on December 15th near Lopez Canyon, they heard a woman screaming. As they focused their eyes on the source of the sound, they saw two men forcing their way into a woman's car. The two men overpowered the women, and after gaining entry, they drove away.
And one of them jumped her on the driver's side, and the other one comes running around on the other side, and she was screaming.
With these new leads in mind, investigators began to speculate that Melanie had either been kidnapped or had been the victim of a carjacking gone terribly wrong. Melanie's friends and family told the LAPD that she had no known enemies and was a sweet and gentle woman who was loved by all. The LAPD also had to consider whether Melanie's ex-husband, whose name was not released to the public, was somehow involved in her disappearance. When a woman goes missing, it is commonly seen that the husband or partner is responsible for her disappearance or death. No information indicates that Melanie's husband was ever considered a suspect. Whilst the LAPD were hard at work trying to track Melanie down, another unusual source began their own investigation. On December 17, 1980, 32-year-old Etta Smith awoke as usual. She donned her uniform and went to the Lockheed Aerospace plant where she worked as a shipping clerk. While Etta was working away at her desk, a news story came on the radio. Everyone's ears pricked up when they heard that a 31-year-old nurse named Melanie Uribe had mysteriously disappeared on her way to work just 2 days earlier. Those in the office let out small gasps of shock and discussed the case with each other. How could a woman just disappear, and what had happened to her? Whilst her colleagues were chatting, Etta was overcome with intense visions of Melanie. She first saw that Melanie wasn't in a house. The visions grew stronger and stronger, and she said it was almost as if someone was trying to talk to her.
And as soon as they said house-to-house search, it was as if I heard someone speaking to me, said she's not in a house. And as soon as that thought registered, I saw exactly where she was. It was like there was a picture in front of me.
After establishing that she wasn't in a house, Etta's visions took her down a canyon and a winding road. The sides of the road were littered with shrubbery and trees, and sprawling hills could be seen in the background. During this vision, something just off a dirt road caught Etta's eye. It was something white, starkly contrasting with the greenery surrounding it. It looked like a uniform, but Etta wasn't sure. The vision played out like a movie for Etta. Once the vision was over, Etta was left stunned. She had never experienced psychic abilities before and didn't know what was happening. Inside, a moral dilemma was raised. She knew that the police would not believe her and think she was a madwoman, but for the sake of Melanie, she knew she had to tell someone what she saw. Etta remained at her desk for a few moments, pondering her choices. Just minutes after she had been hit with the bizarre vision, Etta excused herself from work and headed to the LAPD's Foothill Division.
When I get to a certain point, if I turn right, I'm going home. If I turn left, I'm almost immediately in front of the police station. The argument I'm having with myself is, should I tell them or should I not?
Those who worked with Etta were confused by the entire event. She had never expressed any inklings of psychic abilities before, and now she had had a vision of a missing woman. Was Etta experiencing some sort of mental break, or was she right? When she arrived at the LAPD, she was not greeted with open arms. LAPD officer Lee Ryan took Etta's report and was skeptical about her vision. When Detective Ryan saw that Etta worked for Lockheed Martin, a very reputable company, he felt more at ease and like he could trust her. During the meeting, Etta described the scene in vivid detail and even pointed to Lopez Canyon on a map. She told officers that she had seen something white in the distance off a dirt road and feared that it was Melanie's nurse uniform. We do not know whether the LAPD had released details about Melanie's car being discovered in Lopez Canyon the day before. Either way, this information only made Etta's claims more credible. She told Detective Ryan that they needed to check this area, stressing the urgency of the situation. She told officers that she had not had any visions before or after this event. Detective Ryan and his fellow officers listened closely to Etta's story and assured her they would check the area.
I have to tell you, this missing lady, I could see where she was. Can you show me this on a map? And I said, sure.
Etta left the police station that evening with a renewed sense of urgency. She felt that the LAPD hadn't taken her seriously and was concerned that they would delay searching Lopez Canyon. Her mind swirled with possibilities and scenarios as she drove to collect her kids. She was torn. Should she wait for the LAPD to do their job, or should she get involved? Something compelled Etta to make a decision that would change the course of her life. According to reports, Etta was already late collecting her children that afternoon. When Etta finally showed up, they expected to be taken home, but Etta had other ideas. She collected her 20-year-old niece, and along with her 2 children, the 4 of them drove out to the exact spot where Etta had seen Melanie in Lopez Canyon. As Etta's car slowly rolled to the Lopez Canyon entrance, something inside her changed. She felt as though she was being directed by a force bigger than herself. She noticed tire tracks on the road and slowly crept alongside them so as not to destroy any evidence. Etta's children had their faces pressed up to each window and played the lookout role. After a few minutes of driving, Etta decided to get out of the car and follow the tracks on foot. She later told Unsolved Mysteries that when she put her hand in the dirt, it felt electrifying and that she could feel the trauma of Melanie. The group veered off down a small dirt road, the same dirt road that Etta had seen in her visions. Just as the group were beginning to think that all hope was lost, one of Etta's children motioned her over. In the distance, amongst the grass and bushes, was a white nursing shoe. A wave of emotions washed over Etta again, and she instinctively knew it was Melanie. She ordered her children to get back in the car. The group drove from Lopez Canyon to the closest phone, where Etta dialed 911 and asked for Detective Lee Ryan of the LAPD. A sea of squad cars arrived over the horizon, and Etta followed close behind. She knew in her heart of hearts that the body she had just discovered was that of Melanie Uribe, but she needed to see for herself. Melanie's body was found discarded in a bush in Lopez Canyon above Lakeview Terrace. When her body was discovered, she was found naked with just her nursing shoes on. It was clear to officers at the scene that she had suffered extensive injuries, but the severity of these injuries would not be released until the coroner conducted their report. Melanie's family were notified of her death, and they arrived at the medical examiner's office demanding answers. In their report, the coroner noted that Melanie had been assaulted before being beaten to death and her body dumped in a bush. The brutality of the crime shocked Burbank. Melanie was a sweet and kind woman who worked as a nurse. Who would want to hurt someone who does so much good for others and the community? The LAPD reevaluated Etta's story and wondered how she knew so much about Melanie's disappearance and where to find her. It appears that they did not release the location of Melanie's van to the public in the early days of the investigation, so how did Etta know the exact place to find Melanie's body? Etta quickly became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. Many LAPD officers didn't believe in psychics or psychic abilities and dismissed Etta as a madwoman.
I don't think they're believing me. I kept telling them the same thing.
Shortly before the questioning began, Etta was arrested for her potential involvement in Melanie's murder. She was questioned by LAPD officers for 10 hours straight. They tried to pressure her into confessing and did their best to try and break her down. One source even reported that they held her in a cell for 24 hours without food or water. Etta agreed to take 2 polygraphs to prove her innocence, and she passed both with flying colors. At first, officers accused Etta of cheating on the test by controlling her breath and nerves. Etta told Unsolved Mysteries that the officers then lied about the results, telling her she failed.
They said, you failed.
This was an attempt to coax a confession out of her. But Etta refused to confess to a murder she did not commit. As Etta wasn't cracking, the LAPD charged her with being an accessory to murder and threw her into a prison cell. For 4 days, Etta stared at the iron bars before her, wondering if she would ever be free. What Etta didn't know was that on the outside, the LAPD had made significant headway in Melanie's case. Etta was purposefully kept in the dark as some officers secretly hoped that she would snap and tell them what they wanted to hear.
Not a letter, not a phone call, nothing. They treated me like so much dirt that you kick out the door and the wind blows away.
Thankfully for Etta and her family, a vital clue would be called in just days after Melanie's murder. In late December 1980, the LAPD received a call from a secret informant. In this call, the informant told them that he heard 21-year-old Spencer Nelson, 20-year-old Luis Carnell, and a 17-year-old boy whose name wasn't released due to his age bragging about the murder of Melanie Uribe. This news traveled fast around the neighborhood, and soon most of Burbank had heard the rumors. One of the trio had openly bragged to someone in his neighborhood that he and his friends were quite literally getting away with murder. The group were smug, but that smirk was about to be wiped from their faces. Days after the informant called, the LAPD moved in and arrested the 17-year-old boy, Spencer Nelson, and Luis Carnell Morgan. During questioning, one of the men cracked under pressure and turned the other two in. He told the LAPD everything they needed to know about that chilly December morning. Upon hearing that their friend had ratted them out, the other two quickly followed suit and admitted to killing Melanie Uribe. According to the three men, they spotted Melanie that morning and decided to jump into her truck while she was stopped at traffic lights. The three quickly overpowered Melanie and took control of the truck. From here, they drove to Lopez Canyon, around 15 miles from Melanie's home, where they found a secluded spot on a dirt road. Here, the three men sexually assaulted, beat, and robbed Melanie, all while she begged for her life. The trio also admitted that the crushing blow was a large rock to Melanie's head. They showed no mercy while she begged on her knees. Once she was dead, they threw away her clothing and threw her into some bushes. They also decided to burn Melanie's truck to destroy evidence, and all it did was allow the police to focus their efforts on a particular location. All three men were charged and convicted of Melanie's murder and were sentenced to prison. No information is available about the trial or the sentences handed down. Shortly after the three men confessed to Melanie's murder, Etta was set free and exonerated.
All of a sudden, somebody appeared at my cell door, unlocked it, and said, "Come on, you're free to go." I didn't know why, didn't care why. I just wanted out of there.
She didn't let her experience hold her back and immediately sought further legal action against the LAPD. In 1987, Etta's trial against the LAPD would finally end. As the Los Angeles Times reported, Etta had been fighting this case for almost 6.5 years when a verdict was reached. Etta was forced to revisit traumatic experiences and explain her strange psychic visions to the court. The courts agreed that Etta had been wrongfully arrested during the investigation into Melanie Uribe's murder. Her defense attorney stated that finding a body isn't a crime, neither is having a vision. Etta Smith asked the courts for $750,000 in damages for the trauma she was put through. She also stated that her personal and professional reputations had taken a hit, and that the purpose of this trial was also to clear her name and prove that she was not involved in the murder of Melanie Uribe. In 1987, Etta Smith was awarded $24,000 in damages. Etta now uses her psychic abilities to help other police departments solve cases. And do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories.